Ladies and gentlemen, dear esteemed viewers of Civic Space TV, welcome to this edition of the Community Show webinar. Today, our topic is a simple one, 59 years of independence. What does this mean for the everyday Ugandan? Our panel is made of two distinguished gentlemen and two ladies. To the gentlemen first, we have Mr. Nkunda Mandela, who is a lawyer and an NRM ideologue. On the other side, the gentleman is FDC ideologue and botanist, political activist, Atuhaire Brian. We are supposed to be joined also by the presidential advisor on Greater Massacre, that is Justin Namere. And finally, the date is 9th October, the year is 1962, it's the stroke of midnight, and the soldier Major Kanuti Akirimo marches forward. He is followed by a guard in tow. His mission down the Union Jack, the easily recognizable blue with red and white strips British flag that had flown across African continent, and most of British colony, if not all. Erstwhile described as being on the horizon, Uganda's independence was now here. The Union Jack was lowered and the black, yellow, red stripped Ugandan flag flown up. That, ladies and gentlemen, marked the independence of Uganda from British colonial rule. But we can pause and ask, was it actually the March of Independence? Fast forward, Mutesa became president, Obote became prime minister, and a few years later, the former was disposed of by the latter, only to be disposed of himself in 1972 by Idi Amin Dada. Chaos and turbulence were shaping the new nation in more ways than many thought. Change by use of arms had become the norm, a culture, a thing that was here and looking like it was going to stay for such a long time. By the time Amin was sent packing in 1979, he had been here for 8 years. Between Amin and 1986, when Museveni took over, we had at least 6 hostile changes of guard, that is by the force of arm. Some 34 years later, today, that is since 1986, when Uganda was liberated by the NRM government, or was it liberated? We are stuck and questions abound. Are we independent or are we liberated? This is the discussion, ladies and gentlemen, that we're going to have on Civic Space TV today. So I'll begin with Mr. Mandela Nkunda, the NRM ideologue. Mr. Mandela, I just want you to tell us, do you feel that Uganda is actually independent as it is today?
Thank you so much, Godwin. In my opinion, Uganda is independent. Since we have laid the background of how we attained the independence in 1962, what transpired after 1962 may make Uganda not completely independent in some scenarios because of the political prayers, but in actual sense, Uganda is a sovereign state. It has got all the arms of government. It has a leader who was sworn in legitimately. It meets all the requirements of an independent state, and it received international recognition when it became independent in 1962. So I am proud that I am Ugandan, and Uganda is a very independent country. Thank you.
You're proud that you're Ugandan and Uganda is a very independent country. I don't know if Atuhaire Brian thinks the same. Brian, do you feel like Uganda is independent?
First of all, Mandela thinks Uganda started in 1962. One, we lost our independence through a mechanism. And since the loss of independence through that mechanism, Uganda has been kept by that mechanism. It included getting independent states, maybe of Bunyoro, Toro, Ankole, and using guns and force, bring them together into a country you call Uganda. Now, those guns that were used to bring Uganda together have continuously controlled Uganda over years, up to date, not because the people have wanted to be kept like that, but rather the mechanism put by the British rule, coercing independent states into a country called Uganda, maintaining them using guns, and then transferring the guns from the white man and his agents into the hands of what you call black leaders, and therefore the independence leaders, and the citizen having nothing at all in change in terms of mechanisms under which they are governed daily. So the only thing we had was change of guns from a white man to guns to a black man, who has since then carried on the agenda of the colonialists without any independence. And that's why whenever there is a challenge in Uganda, the talk is not about let's speak about it. The talk is that query the thing, go beat them up, arrange them accordingly, because that's how we are maintained, using the gun. So for anyone to say Uganda is independent, Uganda can only be independent if the citizens of Uganda are independent. Now, the moment the Ugandans are not independent, there's no independence to talk about. That's one. But two, I heard Mandela talk about Uganda having a leader and therefore legitimately sworn in and all those things. Like I've already said before, for every system to work, whether bad system or good system, they will have a law and therefore have that legalese, that legal knowledge, that legal things of yours that you talk about. For example, even apartheid was illegal. Apartheid was a legal regime. They voted for their leaders, and so they had swear in legitimately and occupied the offices legitimately. If you opposed it, you are illegitimate, you are charged of treason. And legitimacy does, the people that make the law are the ones governing. Now, the people that govern will always make a law that favors them to govern you. Not until every person is brought to the higher pyramid where decision making is done, then we can speak about independence. So there is nothing like, I'm not excited about Uganda's independence, whether we had been under British rule or because British rule or under our black rulers would be the same. Actually, the black rulers are even worse because they deprive even the basics from Ugandan citizens. We can say, and I want to say something as I finish. When the British came, they found that Uganda had copper in Kilembe, so they built roads. They built the railway to Kilembe to collect our cobalt and copper. They again built. They then went to Soga and collected cotton. And some areas of West Nile and everywhere cotton was being grown. So, for example, infrastructure that she talked about and the development is just aimed at, again, extraction of people's property and people's richness. That's why when you're rich didn't have roads yesterday, now has an airport, has everything, because we have oil to mine and extort from Ugandans. So the infrastructure development talked about is not development for the people. It is development to enable. It's a mechanism of enabling our rulers to extort and steal from us, not because they love us. Because not people who are going to be told, you see, now we have an airport, yes, but the airport is there. If they didn't have the oil, there would be no airport in that place. There would not be anything. But now it's talked about by the Mandelas as development, as what. Also, the British did these things. They built railway lines, they built roads, but all in all, take away people's property. You have been saying yesterday, we saw in the Daily Monitor on how some minister of security has offshore companies and tax havens and taking everything from here, from Uganda. They don't steal from anywhere. The Britons store us. The British store Ugandans, but also Ugandans are stealing Ugandans. All that makes the citizens not feel independent, because if you don't have economic independence and everything is taken off from you, you can't talk about independence. That's my thinking.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much. You and Mandela have brought in the dimension of arguing Uganda from 1986. So for our next panelist, Marion Kirabo, I'm going to ask of you. You are a lawyer, you have read the constitutional history of Uganda, and I want it from your own assessment. Don't say according to this professor or according to the professor, just from your own assessment. When you read Uganda's past and Uganda's present, from your own lenses, do you think that it's true that, do you agree that from 19 1962 to 1986 seem to have been worse off than there is from 1986 to today, where we are 2021. And before you come in, I'm going to ask Brian Atuhaire to just mute his microphone so that in case of anything, we don't get any background noise. Over to you, Marion.
In my opinion, yes and no. Of course, considering all the constitutions that we have had, the 1995 constitution is relatively the best. It acknowledges a number of human rights and the fact that human rights are inherent. It acknowledges, fights against discrimination based on gender, class, etc. It acknowledges different human rights, right to life, right to health, protection from torture, and all that. It meets the standard of let me say, what a proper constitution is supposed to be according to international standards, or what we recognize in our world order today as a proper and a good constitution by all standards, irrespective of the several amendments that have been made to it, of course, to keep one regime of power in place, but relatively compared to the other constitutions that we have had throughout history since we got independence, much better. On the face of it, if we're looking at the legalese and we're comparing relatively on the international scale, and we are comparing with other countries, Uganda seems to be on the, let me say, legally, and that is before we go into whether the law is implemented or not, or whatever is happening on ground. On the surface of it, if we go only at the legalese itself and the definition of what an independent in the international world order, we do meet. However, to me, I think independence, when we're talking about independence, especially for African states, we need to look at how they came into being. And even if we're just to look at the law, and the law that established them as independent states, and the law that we use as criteria to establish them as independent states, you will find that for most of the laws that we adopted, even at the time of independence, there is a resemblance. If you go and look at all African states at the time of independence, you will say that most of their constitutions are the same, word by word. And most of them were made in such a way that most of these laws are borrowed from their, let me say, colonial masters. And there seems to be that at the time of their being, let me say, as established, that a common African citizen, even the meaning of some of these laws, you will find that they have little or no understandings of some of these legalese, because this is completely an alien legal regime that has been, I will say, imposed on them. Because apart from the few elitist African leaders that went to these different conventions, most of African citizens were left out in the making of most of these laws. So if we have a foreign law that was basically imposed on us, and it is the one that recognizes the independence of these states, and we have a foreign constitution that also has its roots from our colonial masters, how independent can we say is, for example, our rule of law? How independent can we say, for example, our courts? Isn't it the fact, can't we say that actually, whereas you see these judges in robes, and whereas you see these establishments of three arms of government, they're actually puppet masters behind pulling the strings and deciding for you what is just and what is not. We have had this debate over, let me say, the Kanyamunye case, whereby it was, let me say, the traditional form of justice versus the Eurosec form of justice, or what we have, or what we recognize nationally as just. That for the family, it was enough for this man to go and apologize and give whatever form of payment they considered as justice. But the people agreed, for them it was settled and done. But now when they go to court, the judge is like, for me, to me, that is not justice. It's not written anywhere in the law. And therefore, for me, I don't recognize it and everything. We have also seen these cases, when we talk about the fact that the community, even in northern Uganda, the fact community comes and says, customarily, this is how we used to handle issues of conflict. We sit down and we talk about it, and we then pen out what we recognize and what we understand in our layman's thinking that should be justice, versus what the courts would recognize as justice. And so it goes back to the thing of when we're talking about the rule of law, and you're asking people to follow a law that is alien to them versus a law that they understand, that for them they feel that is justice for them. When we're talking about these things of bail and, let me say, the right to life and all these things, what is the understanding for the citizen? What is just them? Perhaps some of the problems that we have right now are because we have these alien laws that we don't seem to understand or respect. We have, yeah.
I'm going to ask that you hold it there. I bring in the other panelists, and we shall always get back to this.
Yeah.
Okay. Allow me move back to Mandela now. Mandela, I hope you're there still. I just want to understand from your own perspective. You two have read quite a bit. I mean, if you're a lawyer, you've really read about Uganda's constitutional history, Uganda's past, and you definitely know a thing or two about the present since you're living the present. I just want to know from you, Mandela, what period do you consider to have been the worst since Uganda's independence in 1962 to date? And particularly, would you single out and say that in these particular years, Uganda had reached the aim of its constitutionalism, human rights record, and ABCD, and then you give us the reasons such as ABCD.
Thank you so much, Godwin. From the previous panelists, it seems we have diverted the discussion from independence to discussing the current government, and especially with Brian. This debate is about the sovereignty of the country, whether Uganda is a sovereign state or whether it is not. A sovereignty may mean political sovereignty or economic sovereignty. Well, I accept we have challenges here and there, and these are not challenges of Uganda alone. They are challenges which are faced across Africa, given our history of colonialism. We still face challenges of neo-colonialism, and this is not in Uganda alone. But like we have guided over the years, since 1962 to present, we have seen a very big shift, especially starting with the NRM government in 1986. We have continuously strengthened ourselves both politically and economically. Uganda as a country is trying to fight so hard so that we maintain our sovereignty. Our budget, our national income has increased from 1986. Our sovereignty, peace and security across all the borders of this country have been secured. We have incidents of insurgencies here and there, But those are few isolated cases. So when we are talking about independence of Uganda, we are talking about how able we have been to rule ourselves, to manage ourselves, and to govern our own affairs. Back to your question, I think the period between 1971 and 1979 was the worst period because then we did not have a constitution. It was purely military rule, and there was gross violation of human rights. The NRM government, before it became NRM, the current president, the commander-in-chief, was then doing the clandestine work of fighting such impunities. And by 1979, he was able, together with other colleagues, through NLF, to capture power. And that's how they toppled the main government. Today, Uganda is not yet there, but at least we have taken very, very great strides to maintaining our sovereignty, especially the economic sovereignty. There are a few cases of, corruption and all of that, but these are, everywhere across the world. Criminality is everywhere. But I don't associate with myself with the thinking that if a government official goes and invests in a foreign country, like what Brian mentioned, that is a sign of corruption. Brian can also go and open up a company in UK. This is, the world is a global village. Everyone, you cannot limit me from investing in a certain country unless you have got trace to indicate that this money invested in this country was money which was meant to build roads or what. Short of that, it just becomes hearsay and rumor. So by and large, Uganda is independent, and we are pushing towards a very good direction. This is just 59 years away. Other countries which we want to compare ourselves with have been independent for the last 300, 200 years. So I think our role as Ugandans, collectively, is to ensure that we build our country. Lastly,
I got you loud and clear. It's our role to ensure that we build the country that we call our home as Uganda. I just want to pick it up from there, and I'm going to be critical this time. When you say that there was no constitutionalism, there was no constitution between 1971 and 1979. Today we have a constitution, but that we can change whenever we want. We can go against. Yeah, there are things that are done today in Uganda systematically, and they are unconstitutional. And I'm sure that you know a couple of them yourself, being a lawyer. So is that the difference? That while we are not upholding the constitution, at least there's a constitution. Unlike that time when there was no constitution to talk about. Do you feel like that is the big plus here, and perhaps the difference? And then when you talk about human rights, what do you hold of the human rights status quo as of today? Do you think that this is the best we can have under the circumstances, or there is just much more work to be done? I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Godwin. Yes, I talked about constitutionalism between 1971 and 1979. So if you are talking about a constitution which can be amended, I'm talking about a situation where there is nothing to amend, nothing to change. Still, as a lawyer, there are always modes of amending the constitution. That is also provided within the law. What is not accepted is changing a constitution in a mode which is not provided. And we have courts and such issues which you are mentioning have been tried in courts, and courts have pronounced themselves on that. And I cannot pretend to be more knowledgeable than the justices of the Supreme Court who determined, and the Court of Appeal who entertained those matters. So a constitution can be amended if it is amended within the law. But not having a constitution at all is a complete violation of human rights. On the issue of human rights, currently, I cannot say that we have the best record, but at least we are seeing efforts of supporting civil society organizations, courts establishing their own, military establishing their own court system to discipline those who mishandle citizens of this country. So at least we cannot say that we are doing bad, but those incidences, like I've said, are everywhere in every country. So the human rights record here needs to be worked on more to improve the image, but we are not doing very bad. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. What I consider a smart answer. Now let me move to Atuhaire Unstoppable. Atuhaire, I'll ask you the same question. When you look at Uganda's independence from 1962 to date, and for someone that has participated in this country's politics, that has read and knows a thing or two about the past, I want to, from your own assessment, which period would you consider to have been Uganda's lowest as far as independence, in the true sense of constitutionalism, rule of law, and all the things that Ugandans agreed to govern them is concerned, and why you take that particular period?
Okay, first of all, before I answer your question, there is something Marion said that I'd want to say. Today we have COVID-19, so if I'm making rules and laws, I might quote the one things about COVID-19, because COVID-19 is there. We cannot thank those ones who made the Constitution of 1995 for having considered gender into the Constitution, because anyway, the word gender was coined by sexologists sometime like around 1955, then it continued being gender, discussed, and it went to its peak in the late 80s and early 90s to be considered. Therefore, making a constitution that during that time required that you put some gender issues, because gender was there. We cannot blame those ones who made the constitutions in 1962, 1967 for having not considered the gender, because anyway, gender was not a discussion then. So that one of gender and praising the constitution because included gender was because gender anyway was a discussion then. Like the COVID-19 is a discussion now. So we cannot continue praising Toko for bringing COVID or taking out COVID, because anyway, it is there, has to be discussed. And then the 1995 Constitution found gender when it was an issue and had to be discussed. Now, I do not know why you want to ask me which period I consider the worst. Because Uganda has not had a good period anyway from when it was colonized. From the formation of Uganda to today. And Mandela should not confuse these things of saying, if I say that, then I'm hitting the current government. I am simply saying the colonial government abused rights. The Obote government abused rights. The Mutesa government abused rights. The Amin government abused rights. Atuhaire abused rights. Museveni is abusing rights. And we should only look into what we can do stop the abuse of rights by anybody, because there is no, you see, I don't believe in the Bible and in those things of yours of God, of your Christianity which you brought here. But all I'm saying is one thing, that in the Bible there is no small sin. You steal a needle, you go to hell. You kill a person, you go to hell. And human rights cannot be made, because we cannot talk about human rights when people are standing by the sides of their fathers and mothers' graves of people killed like just last November. And their children, they can see their children are abducted, but we are here saying their rights. But neither can speak about rights during Amin's regime, because the same graves exist. Even the same graves existed during the colonial period by Captain Rugad in Bunyoro and Uganda. So all governments, all central governments have abused rights, land rights, what rights, only that it's because when power is controlled by the gun, by a cartel, stroke a junta, whether it's colonial or what, it doesn't matter. So the only fight is for total liberation, silencing the gun and having the people speak. Then you can stop the abuse, then you can speak about the independence. But for you to want to mention independence and then, like Uganda saying, Gotwara speed, you want us to discuss from there between bad governments and consider which one was better than the other. All of them have been bad because they are using a template of the colonial master, which colonial master governed Uganda using a gun, or Botanist is using a gun. Use the guns, and for a constitution must be working and protecting the people. It's just having a book somewhere in a shelf saying we have a constitution. But I recently made a tweet that was a joke. People thought it was a joke. But choosing, saying, okay, now that article I don't want it, remove it, put for me this one, that can't be a constitution. And then Parliament that votes when it is voting for a Speaker of Parliament, when it is surrounded, when changing the laws, including breaking people's bones, change the laws, and then you say such a product is called a constitution. And also, it's no longer the 1995 constitution, maybe as amended, but it has since lost meaning. The 1995 constitution had term limits, had the age limit, had many other things that have since been mutilated, and we need to talk about those things, and all of them border to loss of independence to the gun. Let's not differentiate, let's not call independence being ruled by a black person vis-a-vis a white person. Uganda has not had independence anyway. All we have is a group of people. We have always had groups of people change governments using arms and having. And for Mandela, we cannot be 59 years and we fail to speak about a government that has spent 36 of those years in government or in the colonial thing. So we shall speak about it because 59 years minus 36 is about 23 years. So you cannot, they have governed Uganda. Maybe the colonial government has governed Uganda more time than 7 years. No other person has governed Uganda more than 7, not even the colonial government, because the colonial government changed the governors.
I want Marion to respond to what you've just said, particularly regarding the issue of
gender.
Gender being the talk now, unlike then, and so there was no reasonable ground whatsoever to discuss gender then. Marion, do you want to say something about that? Do you acknowledge that perhaps when we judge our period from independence, we should acknowledge that at certain points, certain things globally were unheard of, that certain things could not even be talked of at some particular points. But if we see them now, it's not necessarily because the NRM government or because the particular leader is working extremely hard, but because it is now the in thing, it's the fashion, it's the trending thing, and every government, whether it's Uganda, DRC, Kenya, or a country that is in turmoil like Libya, will adopt them. Do you agree with that?
Okay. I would say that to a certain extent. To a certain extent, perhaps yes, because even when we look at the constitution that we did inherit at independence, when you were looking at the Lancaster Conference and where people sat down, most of our laws are really borrowed from the laws of our European masters at that time. So I would agree to him. And at that time, even in Europe, actually that there were a lot of European countries that did part of our property, married women having to be, how can I say, they could not own property, they could not stand in those contracts, So the law of that are such that women basically are not recognized as a separate entity of themselves. Basically, the only way a woman could have rights is if she was in a marriage, and there's a saying in Europe that the two become one, which is in essence the man. So everything that she had rights to, she had to go through her husband. So perhaps to a certain extent, he might be right when he talks about that. That at that time the conversation wasn't really about men, but as great. because of the conversations of the national, the global space, and then they then become. However, I would say going into the 1970s, and as time goes on, I think we make a mistake by not crediting the government of Museveni enough, because when we start from the 1970s and onwards on the global scale, these conversations about women were happening, and until Museveni, really no president saw it fit to include some of this into our constitution and our laws. And even at the time when he issues, I don't take it for granted that even up to now, there are some countries that really do not recognize women's rights, or women's rights, the right of women to exist as an entity, as human beings. I don't want to take it for granted that Uganda has been one of the countries that goes the extra mile as to introduce things like affirmative action for girls, which in some countries, like in some European countries, it's even a conversation that in some countries they might not have. I think Uganda has taken the extra mile to go as progressive as possible, and when it comes to issues of women and making sure that we have a place, I think Uganda has been even more progressive than actually most European countries. It's even more, I would say, at least according to the law, more progressive than even America itself when it comes to women's rights and women's issues. Whether we implement our laws or not, what I can say that when it comes to the legalese part of it, we are doing so well in the protection of women's rights and advancing women's rights. So yes, the conversation was taking place at that time when we included it in our constitution. However, for Uganda as a country, and maybe the second country I can put there is Rwanda, we have taken an extra mile in promoting the rights of women, at least legally, and to an extent structurally. We have adopted things that even some white countries would not think of. Yes, we're still lacking in some areas, but at least that is one thing I have appreciated about Museveni's government. So to me, it's a yes, and I would put a quiet and say that.
So Brian wants to respond, but I'll only bring him on when it's his time to speak, and then he will have a minute to respond to you, and then we can proceed. So I move back to Mandela, and now I want us to look at something different. So we are independent today. Let's forget whether or not we are being governed well and all that. That's a discussion we can always continue having. And I want us to look at this from the perspective of neo-colonialism. So we know that Africa and Latin America, Asia, most of the third world got independence, but it is said that as soon as the white man left, he entered through the back door and continued engaging in more of the colonialism, albeit indirectly, through economic use of economic hurdles and things of the sort. So I just want to understand, Mandela, from you, when you look at Uganda, our president keeps bashing the West. He keeps saying things about them, but today we know that our roads are being built by China, our education is being funded by America, the clothes I'm putting on are most likely from China, the laptop I'm using is probably from America. Like we seem to be so reliant on these very colonial people that we try to detach ourselves from. How much does this affect our independence? How much can we brag that we're independent if up to today, most of the things that we depend on, the aid, the money, everything is being given to us? Look at COVID. We are being given the test tubes. We are being given the vaccines. We are being given everything. I mean, we are begging for these things. So how much do you think that this affects our independence as a country and as a continent being affected?
Thank you so much, Toko. The issue of neo-colonialism goes back to economic capacity, because when the colonialists left, everything had been robbed. All the African countries were left poor and economically weak. So over the years, over a period of 60 years since when most of the East African countries got independence, there has not been a very quick recovery from that. But as we have had discussions from our leaders, even recently during the Dubai Expo, they have been emphasizing formation of strong economic blocs on this continent. Before even talk about the military blocs or military coalitions or strength, we need to build economic blocs, free trade areas. That's why they're advocating for East African integration, ECOWAS, SADC. Minus that, we cannot talk about absence of neo-colonialism on this continent. And foreign countries, the whites have got well-established foreign policies, which they still want to pursue, even in 100 years to come. So, depending on our economic muscle and our level of innovativeness and the culture of our societies, that's how we shall, come to match the foreign countries. If we have a society and a social fabric which is completely destroyed and which is largely corrupt from the beginning, which social fabric they have worked on, to make it take that direction, it's going to be very, very hard for us. That's why I also advocate for strong leaders who are going to change the thinking of the people. And it does not take just 10 years or just 1 term or 2 term limits. It will take a lot of time to create a society that will be able to understand the problems of Africa, train human resource, acquire new technologies, make innovations, and improve our economic muscle. As long as we are still kneeling on the doors of the colonialists and the former colonial masters and other so-called allies, including China of late, we cannot do away with neo-colonialism. Actually, during colonialism, we could only have one colonial master. But as we are talking, we have several colonial masters. So it is our role as Africans to initiate a debate, especially to create a culture among ourselves and call upon other Africans in diaspora to come back home and build something that is going. Otherwise, we shall keep talking and debating about these things, but nothing will ever take place. That's my view on that.
Thank you, Mandela. I see Brian is back. Brian, welcome back. So you're going to begin by responding to Marion, and you should be quick enough to do that in a minute so that you can spare time. But then after that, I want you to tell us how in what states like Uganda. And then 2, the government of the NRM has often accused opposition, civil society of being stooges, of being puppets being used by the neo-colonialists to further their fear that after the NRM is gone, we may end up being colonized again, because the NRM government says, it's these guys, they're bringing money and all that. So just tell us that.
Marion I think is a very brilliant woman, but of course, I cannot shoot her issues very well, and I want to thank her for that. I haven't had many discussions with girls that can discuss like she's discussing. It's good of her. As a person interested in human empowerment, it's a good thing. But and other countries and what? It's what we're going to start discussing in front that's going to inform this discussion. Maybe 1, a donor-dependent country, and your donors want you to put gender on the table. You'll put gender on the table even if you didn't want. Your donors want you to put gender on the table. You'll put gender on the table even if you didn't want. Museveni's government is because it wants a lot of favors from these donors, is a secretary to very, very many things. If we even follow the things they have signed, our budget would not work. Cartagena Protocol, the Paris Agreement, what? Biodiversity Convention, CBD. Now gender and Pan-African, what? Many, many things signed. So when you sign some things, you have to go home and do them because you are promised. And then you get money through them, through you signing, through implementing such. But there is nothing like gender equality when there are no human rights. When men can enter parliament, beat up members of parliament, including women, who are that to represent women, and then you go celebrating the presence of women in parliament when they can be cajoled, beaten anytime that is wanted, and other things. But I want to say that we are more of a, let me leave Marion alone, of course. But on what you're saying about neocolonialism, we are more of a threat. It's not that when the white man went, he gave power, he left power, no. He only appointed their agents here who help them to further their agenda. So Museveni is saying, because I've seen him say many things that many times, that we in opposition, civil society organizations are getting a lot of money from abroad. I want to know how much money Museveni has gotten just from the chief grantee of the Western community is the Uganda government, not NGOs, not political parties. The donations given to Museveni by the US embassy are not even given to anybody, whether in conservation or human rights. So Museveni is the chief recipient of donations and grants from the white man and from the West, not NGOs, not political parties. So if you're the one who has the bigger grant, you cannot start saying the one who gets $20,000 grant is the problem. Yet for you, you're receiving $500,000 grants, $1 million US grants, IMF, World Bank, what, these loans, that one, the USM, the United States of America, the UK, everything, including when they closed DGF recently, we found out that actually most of the government parastatals and bodies were run by DGF money, not NGOs that he was claiming were running. IGG was being run by those people. The judiciary has money from DGF, much money, because you see, for government, they don't even write proposals, I think. So all our climate change is being managed by grants from these people, and government and Ministry of Finance receives grants and donations and loans from these entities than anybody else. But because they want to continuously abuse rights, when you receive $20,000 and you go and have a meeting and say, you're abusing rights, then for you yours becomes much. That's one. So I don't want to discuss the issue of getting donations and grants by CSOs and parties, and therefore being agents of neocolonialism, because the chief agent of neocolonialism is Museveni and his government, because they still receive the money. If you're stealing money, the only way that we can have economic, chase away neocolonialism is stopping this corruption, getting taxes from our people and using them to be economically independent and not go to borrow and get loans and grants. If only Museveni had developed Uganda into a country that sustains its budget and its running, and NGOs remained and parties getting money from abroad, he would have a right to speak. But Uganda is a third world, poorly indebted country that gets grants and donations to run its activities. So the chief recipient is government, not NGOs. Let's not discuss cats when there is a rat and a lion, because all of them are cats. That's one thing I had to put clear. Another thing that I thought that captured my eyes is that if you don't educate your country and you don't have human resource and you're not innovative And for every innovation, whether with a phone, a pen, a needle, you have to spend money and also go abroad to look for that thing. Then there is no way you can fight neocolonialism. Let Mandela tell us which innovations education systems are put in place to make sure that we don't depend on these guys. I think I'm done. That's my opinion.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's a very wonderful opinion. So I'm going to move now to Marion Kirabo. Unfortunately, I've been trying to contact the other female panelists who are supposed to join us, and she seems still held up. So Marion, I want to understand from you, is that neocolonialism a good thing for feminism? In the sense that, well, through lobbying, through advocacy groups in the West, we end up having things like FGM banned. Hello? Yeah, we can hear you, Marion. We end up having things like FGM banned. We end up having the Western lobby saying we need more women in certain positions.
You seem to be working.
Okay, you get me now? Marion, do you get me?
Toko, you're breaking.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I can't hear you sometimes. You keep on breaking.
Atuhaire, do you hear me clearly when I speak? Brian?
Yes, Mandela. I hear you. May I hear you?
So I'm not breaking.
Yes, no, you're not breaking. So Marion has to up her game on the internet.
Marion is the problem on your side. Okay, let me try to speak again. Marion.
The problem.
Let me try to speak again. Let me try to speak again and you see if you can hear me more clearly without the breaking. Okay. So Marion, I was saying, neocolonialism seems from some angles, such a good thing for feminism. I mean, they're saying that we have to have more women occupying certain positions. We have to stop traditional practices that go against women like FGM, like not educating the girl child, and bring women to the fore. I want to get it from your own perspective as a woman and as a feminist. Do you feel as disturbed as Brian and as Mandela on the rise, the new scourge of what they've referred to as neocolonialism, especially the one that is from the West, the liberal West? Marion? Okay. Looks like Marion has issues and she will have to connect.
Marion has jammed, I think.
Okay. Let me ask Nkunda, are you there? Mandela?
Yes, I'm there.
So you listen into Brian's submission. He levels the accusation against the president. He says it's us getting the aid. It's us not doing anything.
Hello?
You're going to come in. You're going to come in just a minute. So I want to get from you, Mandela. What is your response to what the accusations that Brian levied against the NRM government and the presidency?
Thank you, Godwin. Brian is talking about Museveni getting loans and grants and everything. So in almost every country in Africa is prone to that, because when the president came into power in 1986, Uganda's GDP was around 3 billion USD. We did not have much to produce. We did not have a wide revenue base. We are taxing a few, businesses for a few manufacturing businesses for beverages, and no much production was really going on. So we don't have much to get money from so as to avoid, getting grants and all that. So some of these decisions were taken out of pressure, which was not as a product of the NRM's making, but as a product of Uganda's political history since the colonial times up to when he took over power. Over time, we have seen him using these, loans and grants to build an economy that is almost able to finance about 40% or 50% of our budget. So we cannot avoid, he could not have avoided getting loans and grants or becoming a beneficiary thereof. Secondly, it is not about, fighting neo-colonialism is not a one event. It's not a one-off. It is a gradual process. So you cannot start blaming that on the NRM government, which came to power in 1986. Because, like you said, 23 years ago, there were other leaders, political players, who failed on their role. And mistakes, to rectify mistakes created in a period of over 20 years is not a very small task. Yes. So as we are going on, we have seen our economy improve. We have now a GDP of around 37 billion. So I think we are, as time goes on, we are going to create a more independent economy. As for innovation, Museveni has trained human resource. His government has promoted policies and schemes like USE, UPE. Even now, at the university, students can get loans to go ahead and pursue their studies. So once you create human resource, then you are heading towards industrialization. We have seen innovations like Kira MV, like Kayora, by our own students. Universities are getting supported by the government to have innovations and create programs which are aimed at making Uganda self-reliant. We have seen government policies like Buy Uganda, Build Uganda. We are substituting imports with our local made products. What we are importing in 1986, we are producing today and exporting the surplus, like sugar and other things. I am not saying we are there yet, but we are taking a good path. And if we continue harnessing the good policies we have in books, cabinet policies and national development plans, if we even welcome these programs for private sector empowerment, like parish model, and we minimize leakages, Uganda is going to be self-reliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mandela Nkunda. Now, I hope Marion is now clear. So I want to ask Marion the question that I tried to ask earlier, albeit unsuccessfully. Marion, is there a problem with neocolonialism? Is there a problem with the West, the liberal West, bringing the agenda to Uganda and funding it? If that agenda is going to be one that says, let there be no more FGM, let more women occupy positions of power, let the girl child receive an equal education, just like the boy child, from your feminism lenses. Do you see any problem with that?
Hello, Toko. Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
First of all, let me start to make that argument. I want to be very clear on certain things and certain things that I think people who make that argument, there's certain misconceptions that come. First of all, feminism is not a Western concept. The idea of feminism is not totally Western, and it is not an alien thing to African society or African countries. If you read your African history, even if you go through even the African cultures here, you will say that at least women in African societies had relatively, it's not to say that African societies were not patriarchal, but women did have a semblance of power in their small communities, in their small roles, to an extent that in some societies we have histories of women who led battalions of their clans and tribes against the white man We have a whole army of women called the Dahomey in West African region, whereby these women were actually the only evidence that we have of the equivalent of the mythical Amazon warriors. So in most of the African societies, women did have power. Women were rulers, although they sometimes were rulers through their male counterparts. Let me say, for example, the queen mothers did have a role to play on who becomes the next king in, for example, Uganda. There are some West African African tribes where we did see queens who were rulers in their own rights. So it's not to say that the idea of, let me say, women having power, women being rulers and leaders in their society is foreign, that it has to be brought by an alien entity or a foreign entity for it to be imposed. The idea, no matter how subtle it was, of feminism has always been in the African societies. It took, I would say, if anything, the coming of the white man reduced women's agency and women's power in these societies, because they had to create a structure where they give something to African men to hang on to. They had to give African men a semblance of power, since they were facing oppression and their powers being taken away in the public space. They had to give them people to rule over in the private space, to give them that semblance of power so that they can hang on to. So you saw that the white man decides to then split and send most of the women into the private space because he wants to give something to the African man to hang on to, something for him to have control over at the end of the day. Now, back to what you're saying, these international conventions, these things that come in and they're talking about women's rights. After having answered, the thing is that actually we did have our organic ways of protecting women, but they were corrupted. It is not to say that they weren't practices that were cruel to women. I will also show you in the West, there are forms of mutilation of women's bodies, these things of plastic surgeries, Victorian times, women had to use corsets to kind of woman's shape. So there have been mutilations on women's bodies, Only that perhaps, let me say that when it's brought in the African light, it's brought in a more grotesque way and are not very harmful, but practices that are done on women that are harmful. Perhaps the only thing we would say is maybe the level of consent. But if the society standard and wants you to adhere to, we could also question the levels of consent that we have. Now, just like other laws that have been adopted, I think there is need to, let me say, reflect on some of the regimes, the Western regimes that we do inherit from our colonial masters. I recognize that you see, the international conventions do recognize equity and equality between women and men, and they outlaw any discrimination on the basis of gender and sex. However, like I pointed out in the beginning when we were talking about the legalese, when you asked from the legal perspective, can we say that we are independent? I also would like to pose a question that sometimes when we're applying these regimes, sometimes when we're applying these international statutes and international laws, and in general, this is not also only on gender, I think for us, we just copy and paste. And we don't really reflect that, okay, it's not to say that these laws in writing are good, but they were made for a different type of society. And sometimes they have also a hidden agenda, as Brian has pointed out. And so when you just apply them just like that on your community without first understanding your community and how they do affect your community, and even how the people understand those laws, perhaps you miss it, that you might have a very nice law, a very nice piece of legislature, but implementing it becomes hard. I'll give a case in point that a lot of African countries have struggled combating the vice of FGM. And this is because there has been a lot of negativity from the societies that do practice this particular culture, that they come off. It's a rite of passage for most of the women in this society, irrespective of its harmful practices, that you're outlawing it, but for this society, it is what qualifies them to be a full woman. Without it, it is central to their life, their way of life, that with it, that is when a woman is allowed to actually maybe become a mother. That with it is when a woman is allowed to sit in a council and actually discuss, and she's supposed to be. So if you completely remove it and do not replace it with something that they can center their culture around, then it becomes problematic. To you, you become an enemy because you want to do away with their way of life. So what some African countries have done is that, okay, instead of outlawing it completely, can we give the women something else to replace that culture with? Instead of saying that, oh, it's evil, and what, can we sensitize them about the side effects and therefore give them something else to replace that? The women who cut, can we give them another source of livelihood, because they draw their livelihood from there? So we need to be very critical about the copy and paste elements of these laws. How do we then, let me say, if we're saying FGM is bad, how do we then work with the community and understand the community? Because some of these laws are made from those high Western tables, and they have no understanding of the African culture and how it works and how important some of these cultures are. So we as Africans, can we look, okay, this thing is harmful, but how do we interact with the community and understand what this culture means to the community, so that we can slowly but surely not castigate them, but come from a point of understanding and gradually do away with the practice. I don't know if you get me.
I get you.
So for me, I think that is the problem there.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I want us to move to something else, and I'm going to begin with Mandela still. There is a new wave we see on social media. Yeah. For instance, the most recent is what's going on in Dubai. The government officials and the in Dubai and those that support the NRM seem to say that we've done really well in Dubai. We've signed billions of dollars of deals of investment that is coming our way, and it's something we should celebrate. But the others are saying, no, how do you have such a stall? How do you, we've seen Facebook posts of people who are there saying that there's a lot of disorganization, there's confusion, that's marks of corruption and everything. Now, this is not the first time. Remember when it was announced that Uganda was to host the Mama Awards? While some artists seem to be celebrating, some others, there was a whole hashtag on social media that the Mama Awards shouldn't happen in Uganda. So there are people who seem to suggest that, you see, we are Ugandans, that when good things happen in Uganda, we should celebrate them together. But I'm also alive to the fact that if something happens well in Uganda, it seems like the NRM government wants to take credit for it as its own. So like if you have successfully invented the killer EV, it seems to become a project of the NRM. They will use it for their campaign manifesto and everything. When a few days from now, it will be Independence Day. Unfortunately, this one is going to be virtual, but those days before, when independence ceremonies were organized, they more or less turned into NRM functions. I want to understand from you, Mandela, what is happening in Uganda? There seem to be a whole lot of Ugandans who are either indifferent or who are unconcerned and working instead directly against the image of their country. When someone says something good about Uganda online, they're going to post their pictures of the torture and all the other bad things that happen in this country. I'm not saying those things don't happen. I'm saying they happen. So have we gotten to a point of no return, that there are Ugandans who are going to work against Uganda because they know that Uganda no longer works for them? I want to hear from you, Mandela.
Thank you once again, Godwin. Like I've said, we have one country we call home, and that is Uganda. So this idea of people demonizing whatever good thing that comes to our country should really be shunned. And this is the role of political activists, civil society, and as well as the media. See, we have got a class of people who influence so much on social media, and people who seem the intellectuals, these members of parliament don't have really enough following on Twitter and other social media spaces. So giving that example of Mama Awards, they had turned these things into political. Those who are supporting another party were against Mama Awards being hosted here. That is very, very dangerous for a country, especially a young country like ours. We should have that. That's why he said we need to change the social fabric. Our society must change and look at things as a country. I really wonder, when Kiprotich wins the gold medal, we all identify with him and identify with Uganda. When Chira Motor EV is made and used in whatever journal or government journal, then it is shunned because now they brand it as an NRM achievement. Well, now, how about if the Minister of Education and Sports publishes a journal and uses Kiprotich in the journal or uses his picture? Does that mean that next time you're not going to support him or because he's now NRM? There are some things we should, as a country, as civil space, as political actors, journalists, teach the society right from the beginning. Anything that concerns Uganda, whether it is done by someone you don't support politically, is an achievement to your country. If you continue using this notion of Chiba Uganda, at least not here, like trying to portray that anything bad is always associated with Uganda. Now, like today, we have a march against, Rwanda this evening. If Uganda Crane wins, then we all support Uganda Cranes. It was a different thing, or maybe the Expo, because we ranked number 3 in the whole world. But in the early morning, of that day when the Expo was going on, Mandela, everyone was saying, yes, please.
Just so we are sure, who ranked Uganda number 3 and where can we get that?
Of course, there are different websites. Every website can decide to, write whatever they want to write.
Okay, I
can send you the link of that website where Uganda is ranked number 3. I'm not sure about the details now, but we can share it after this discussion.
That's okay.
But other media, other people in Uganda are using media to portray that Uganda was being very bad. I don't know if they wanted us to lift gorillas and take them to Dubai. So I don't really understand.
I asked you because we always want our viewers to be up to date. And we can now agree that some websites, we don't know the credibility of that website, looks like it ranked Uganda as number 3. That while in Dubai, the government of UAE is not saying this is the best and this is the last, and it hasn't done that. But some websites, perhaps people know. You can proceed with your submission, sir.
So I was basically trying to say that we as Ugandans, we need to have that sense of patriotism. I don't know if it needs some kind of added training from the elementary level, from primary schools and all that, but we need that sense of patriotism. We need that sense of self-belonging. We need that sense of defending our country. We should not politicize everything. We can't politicize sports. We can't politicize tourism. We can't politicize things that bring money into the country. Because leaders will come and go, but our country is here to stay. And we are not going to have another country unless we change, citizenship and denounce. But if you have those intentions, please do it very early. But if you don't have such intentions, let's unite. And we are united by our colors and our flag and our national anthem. Let's unite and support whatever comes out of Uganda unanimously, and avoid disease from social media hashtags that portray a very bad image to our country. Thank you.
Okay, but Brian, you are an active user of Twitter, social media site, that where much of this debate is going. And I just want to understand from your own perspective, when you see these debates going on, when you see people saying, don't visit Uganda, when you see people saying, no mama words in Uganda, or making fun of the expo and saying that, hey, this is terrible, sharing pictures of plastic chairs and so many other laughable things there, what comes to your mind? Do you feel like these are just a group of stubborn young people who are feeling bad about the whole thing, or you feel like there's much more that this communicates than meets the eye?
Okay, before that, Marion, thank you for debunking these issues of people claiming that feminism and females being important is funded, and that a fight can only happen if the Europeans are here. Queen Muhumuza fought the Germans in Rwanda, and the men there did not empower her. They instead fought her and they arrested her. They called her Queen Nyabingi. Those people that fund feminism, they brutalized the women Mandela to torture points. And of course, they are promoting their own narrative here. And if they are promoted, they must fund it. We cannot thank them for that. That's a brief thing I can talk about. But why does Mandela think we cannot politicize tourism, but it's okay to politicize the army? We cannot politicize trade, but it's okay to politicize the courts. So who are they to determine what we can politicize and what we cannot politicize? That's something for another day. I think I should go just to your question. And who tells them that these Ugandans are not patriotic? Let me tell Mandela, you cannot destroy where you eat from. If Ugandans were getting a bare minimum share of the Ugandan resources, they would want Uganda to make money. But what's the importance of making money as a country using us, and then the money is squandered? Because if Ugandans were, the reason as why those young people, me sometimes also inclusive, because sometimes it's just devastating. If we were getting a good, because this time Ugandans the other day went to hospitals and found that Uganda did not have hospitals, didn't have beds, something we have talked about for 10, 20 years, and they were paying 30 million shillings through their nose. Others couldn't be given dead bodies recently. Now you're there saying you're making money and you're stealing it here, and you want me to support you to make money that you're going to steal from me. So it's because government, as far as Mandela and his colleagues and his junta want people to participate in development and what, they must also engage them in getting the proceeds of development. A company, Uganda, let's say Uganda is a company, and every person is a shareholder. At the end of the year, when they are dividends, please give everybody their dividend. Don't take our dividends and demand that we must be peaceful and keep quiet about these things, because we don't gain from these things they are doing. But also, Uganda has consistently portrayed itself as one of the poor organizers in the world. That Lato milk thing was in UAE. I don't think it was. If it was Photoshop from here, I want Mandela to say it was Photoshop. But even if you had very many beautiful things, but Lato milk was arranged as that and had to be Lato milk to be shown, that was an ugly picture, and we must talk about it. Can't keep quiet. But also, are they the same? Are they the same Ugandans who made the US ambassador sit on a plastic chair without even arms at the swearing in of the president recently? Are they the same Ugandans that arranged it? So Ugandans, people who arrange for the image of Uganda, arrange poorly. Also, if Toko thinks that if I say visit Uganda and I put police corroborating the woman carrying tomatoes and oranges during the pandemic, am I photoshopping, or it's true Ugandans live that life every day? How can you say you abuse us and you don't tell the world how you abuse us, but you must tell it on how you are good when you are abusing us? Toko, you hear me?
Yeah, I
Toko?
hear you. And
Yes.
I am right here. I want now turn to Marion and ask her the same question. Marion, what comes to your mind each time you see Ugandans engaging in these social media campaigns and saying, don't visit Uganda, let there be no mama words, or making fun or showing the bad side of Uganda at the Dubai Expo, or sharing gross pictures of human rights violations in Uganda when someone says good things about Uganda? What does this say about us as a country?
But if that is their reality, then why don't they express it? I mean, and when people make that argument, so do you want them to sugarcoat? If that is their reality, perhaps for you, your reality, what you see on the surface is, let me say, an electric bus being promoted, and you only see nice things. But if I'm a common Ugandan and I haven't seen it on the road, it has not helped me in any way. And you're getting money for all these billions and billions of dollars of money for whatever projects it is. If I do not feel the trickle-down effect, and my reality is that whatever nice things you do not affect me, so why are you gagging me from speaking to my reality? My reality is that Uganda is not a good place for me to keep, is not a good, that whenever I walk the streets, I live in fear of the police harassing me or beating me. My reality is I live on less than $1 a day. My reality is that whenever I go into an election into this country, I live in fear that my family will be gunned down, or I will receive a call that a family member has been shot. My reality is that I am afraid to go to the polling station and cast my vote because of the harassment that I will receive from maybe leaders in my community that are NRM, or maybe from even the polling agents at the polling station. My reality is that I keep on seeing donors giving so much money to combat COVID, and so much money to the Ministry of Education, and yet the schools of my children, or my school, keeps on being closed. The kids around me keep on getting impregnated even when they are 12 years old. There's no one to protect them. I mean, that is my reality. Why would I speak of something that is alien to me? Why would I speak of a reality that is quite foreign to me? Why would I speak to Mandela's reality when it is not my reality? I think for people who make that argument, then it's time for them to reflect that for all the good that they think they are doing, what is the reality of Ugandans? How comes Ugandans don't see what they need? I throw the ball back to them. Why is it that Ugandans don't see the reality that you're seeing? Perhaps we live in the same world, but really conditions do not affect us the same way. So why do you want me to live your life, when I am constantly living this version of the life you claim that I have? Yeah, to me that would be my simple answer to that.
Okay, thank you very much. I want Mandela to respond in case he has any response for both of you. Then we can move closer to the conclusions. Mandela, do you want to respond to these two panelists?
Yes, I will respond to them generally.
Okay.
Because they're almost talking about the same thing. First of all, we are talking about, Brian asked about, politicizing courts and not politicizing tourism, for example. And he said, people who don't feel trickle-down effect should not defend the government. There are things which are invisible. You don't expect the government to get money earned out of tourism to go and buy posho and sugar for the people. But if they build roads, they construct schools, if they did this, they provide those social services, which I know they are better than how they were, for example, from Kanung or Konjiri, from where Brian comes from, or from where Mariam comes from. If we are seeing things being established out of that money which you get from tourism, I don't think governments really go and buy things and make people share that money. If that is what they want, if that is how they want things to run, I don't know. Maybe that's their thinking. Two, Mariam was talking about a reality of being in fear all the time in Kampala. I know we might not be, living in the same communities, but as far as, for the over 15 years I've been in this town, before COVID, we all move at night, and we don't have bad spots. These are few criminal pockets in a few areas, but by and large, we don't live, in fear in this country. This country has been in peace for the last, 30 years or so. So I don't know. I don't really understand those realities that they are talking about, which I don't share because we live in the same town, we live, same neighborhoods. The issue that we should love our country, we should support our country team, Uganda Crane, we should support tourism. There are some things you cannot change. You cannot say we don't have very many national parks, we don't have flora and fauna, we don't have the best climate. Yeah.
When you say that you live in the same neighborhoods, but you don't feel the reality, I want us to contextualize that. Do you also get bothered that, for instance, last year during elections in November, about 60 people were killed by the state operatives, and most of these were, from the president's words, innocent bystanders who were hit by quote-unquote stray bullets. Do you feel like the families of those people feel that Uganda is working for them, or they will feel more like Marion and Brian? When you look at the young people now, Marion is saying that we have schools closed, and yet we got all this money that if put to good use, we could have possibly had schools open despite COVID. Do you feel like the poor are missing out school? The parents who are having their kids miss out on school. Do you think they live the same reality, or they are in the minority of Ugandans or the majority of Ugandans? And then finally, the hospitals. When Ugandans go to the hospitals and they can't get medication, despite there being COVID, and yet the country got all these loans in the name of COVID, and they can't fill those loans. Do you feel like aren't you asking for too much from them if you expect that they are going to go on social media and either be indifferent or to say, oh, Uganda is the best country, come and visit, let's support the Cranes? Because it could be that they are in the majority, and that is why they seem to sound louder, despite you, who is the minority, possibly saying good things about Uganda. Do you ever get these feelings on your own side?
Thank you once again. When these riots broke up, I was here in downtown Kampala. Probably I could also have been shot, or you, or Brian. But we're all lucky we survived. That was a one-off event, and people who triggered that. It was not the government. It was people on the streets who triggered that for their own reasons, and we don't want to go into that. So if I lost my life, my family would be in grief right now. But that cannot mean that if there is a campaign, to promote tourism, to tell the outside world that we have the best national parks, best flora and fauna, that my people should, dissociate themselves with that statement or say that it is not true. We actually live in a desert. Secondly, to say that, hospitals do not work. Just look at the statistics of people who survived, who recovered during COVID, and those who died. Actually, the Minister of Education, Minister of Health, did whatever they could, but we should discuss Uganda as it is, not as not as it ought to be. Even in other countries, you call the best, people died. So having, there are no cases where people would come out and say they went and were chased away because there are no, even where there are no enough deaths, people will still be treated. Doctors would improvise, district health officers would improvise. So as I told you earlier, we are trying to come out of poverty into a middle income status or a middle income economy, where we think we are going to have that ideal Uganda. But as we are today, we should not run away from, we should not shun our country. We should not, talk ill about our country, about tourism, about trade, about, all the good things we have in this country. Should accept that, but challenge our leaders internally. If we are talking with if you have a fight, you should not get that fight out of your house. Let us organize ourselves internally, advise our leaders internally, but let us not fight ourselves in public. That is my whole argument. Thank you.
Okay, that's a fair response to the two of them. Now we're going to move to the conclusion. Our time is fast spent. So I'm going to begin with you, Mandela. What is your message to the Ugandans out there? What is your message to the Ugandan leaders? Where are we going wrong? What should we do right so that we can accelerate our progress and make Uganda better as we head forward to independence? I mean, what should we be talking about if by any chance we have this webinar 50 years from now and we are celebrating, say like Uganda's 100 years of independence? What should we be discussing at that point? So I'll begin with you, Mandela.
Thank you once again. As I conclude, I implore the government to give space for the young people. People have got training from different parts of the world and in this country who are knowledgeable and who have very good ideas, like the panelists today, like Brian's and you, Toko, to give us that opportunity, not to, to give us that opportunity to express our ideas, receive our, our dissertations. Let the dissertations not be kept in university libraries. Should push those ideas, create incubation centers for young people, such that we see how to help each other and help our country become better. We cannot take out the reality that we need to train young people. If we don't train and welcome young people on board, the system cannot be sustained. If we don't create strong institutions, we are still going to be in same problems. We need to build institutions. We need to recruit people with skills, with competence, and build our country together. And for the young ones who may be viewing this or listening in, let's learn how to love our country and make our individual contributions at every level we can. Thank you, Godwin, and thank you, dear listener.
Thank you very much, Mandela. Like I said at the beginning, it was short notice, but you're here with us. Thank you for your conclusion. Let's now have the same from Atuhaire Brian. What should we do as Ugandans? What should our leaders do so that when we are having this conversation 50 years from now, it can be a better conversation, one of celebrating Uganda's achievements and not questioning whether, for instance, we are independent in the first place?
If only you had the power to choose your leaders, you'd call them your leaders. But they are not your leaders because you didn't choose them, first of all. They are there because they are there by force. So maybe you can say, what should our rulers do? But I think Ugandans just have to work together, those ones that understand where the country is, and see how to drive it from the ruins where it is, because it has been ruined several times. This is another spoiled opportunity by Museveni and his group, and the next government, or the people of Uganda working together, should just work hard to silence the guns and have the people speak and have their voices in decision making, and run a better country that is not like this Benin Republic of ours, rather than trying to defend it every now and then and claiming we have a country to run when you don't have one. You can't have a country with the people that cannot make any decision, where one man decides on what happens. A one man show cannot be a country. Not even families one like that. So let's not talk about a country that doesn't exist. Let's first fight, have a country, and run it. Then I'll be part of that. But to be part of this thing you want to call a country by just go toward speed, it will be very, very hard to join. Thank you, and that's what I think. That's what I think that we can do going forward. That's what I've been working on for almost all my adult life. I hope to one day it materializes and shall have what we can have.
Over to you, Marion. Same question. What should we do differently? If you met the president today, what would you tell him? If you had the chance to Uganda and hear you, what would you tell them so they can do differently for the betterment of our independence? Marion?
For me as an individual, I really have no hope in his generation or that particular cohort. I think they have made their contribution to the country and to their continent as in large. There's not much more they can do, given the fact that they're in the evenings of their age and they have completely given to neo-colonialist powers, and therefore they have decided that then becomes their legacy. So to me, mine goes to our generation, the young people, that we need to start having these conversations. Like Brian says that, basically, perhaps we need to go through to our roots. Unfortunately, our transition to complete decolonization was kind of staggered. There came a time when it just froze in its inception, and what we have is then this pseudo kind of neo-colonialism, and it's not everything is copy and paste, and we still have the puppet masters we haven't completely cut those strings. So for us as young people, the conversation has to start of how do we completely liberate ourselves? Unfortunately, this is our reality that, like Brian says, that we have been crowded into this country, and we have this alien organization and called the country, and then we have this alien structure, and it's only an illusion because we are practically forced to be together. But for me, I think there's little perhaps we can do about that. However, the conversation I would love to have is that how then that we have this is what we have been dealt with. How then do we make it work for us? Is it possible to make it work for us? Is it possible for us to restructure this thing that we have adopted? And as young people, I think it's very important that. Hello?
Yes, Marion, you're on. You're on.
Oh, sorry. I got interrupted by a call. So I was saying, so for us young people, the conversation should be that, okay, generations before us have failed us. So how can we have a conversation as a continent to make this thing called Africa work? How can we have a conversation as a continent? Is it possible for us to decolonize even in these makeshift structures that we call African countries? Is it possible for us to have our own sort of governance that is not necessarily something we have to copy and paste? How can we get rid of these IMF policies, the structured development policies that keep on hindering our progress and success and keep on suffocating our people? How can we then, the cultures that have been corrupted, how can we rediscover a new identity? Of course, we cannot go back to what Africa was before pre-colonial times and we say that is what we want to go through. Our DNA as Africans has been altered so much that to what we were at that we themselves and create for ourselves a new identity that works for us and everything that we are or that we have become. I think that's a conversation that young people we need to have. And it's a conversation that, because for me, I don't believe that after a change of government, everything is going to be fine. The conditions that make, that empower dictatorship will still be in place unless we make a deliberate effort to destructure or remove those structures that make it possible for these dictatorial regimes to thrive.
Okay.
So that should be the conversation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marion. Thank you very much, Nkunda Mandela. I've been getting that wrong. And thank you very much, Atuhaire Brian, aka Unstoppable. The three of you have been wonderful. I'm happy that we've had such a great and engaging conversation. I hope that the fourth panelist should have joined us along the way, but we're unfortunate that she didn't. So our dear esteemed viewers, thank you very much for sparing time to engage in this particular episode. We hope to see you again next week. And we hope that these conversations are making it better for you out there. So we pray that in case you have people that you want us to host, or you think that you should be hosted on this conversation, on this show for this particular conversation, you could just comment under the comments on YouTube. We are going to see these comments, and then we shall get back to you. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share these links with your friends and family to watch these conversations that we hope that will make Uganda a better place. So from us at Center for Constitutional Governance, and particularly Civic Space TV, thank you very much. And we wish you all the best going forward, and all the best as Uganda continues with our independence struggles. Thank you very much.